As you heard this morning from our host, we're in the middle of a month of talking about giving as a spiritual practice. And whenever I talk about giving as a spiritual practice, it's the topic that will stir up people more than any other topic I can think to talk about. And I'll hear from people, because it goes right to the core of our value. And the song set us up beautifully about give all you can, which many of us desire to do. We want to contribute to a world that works for everyone. And when we can't, sometimes we struggle with feelings of self-worth. And it's a very tender topic and deserves to be approached with sensitivity. And this is a good place to do it because we have no religious rules about whether or not you should give. It's just something you either do or you don't do. There's no consequences for not giving other than the consequences that go with being ungenerous. Right, but it's not a God somewhere condemning you. It's just the way of things. So we just notice that there are some things to be mindful of and pay attention to as we explore our relationship to giving. It's an invitation to find out, how do I give and what's it all about, and is there a way for me to grow deeper with my giving if I want to? So we started at the beginning of the month talking about it, the relationship between my inner activity, my attitude and energy when I give, and how that relates to my experience of being in the world. I think the topic was, as you give, so you receive, just like the affirmation said. It points to that relationship between outer and inner. Start there. How am I when I give? Am I all bunched up? Or is it joy-filled? Neither one is right or wrong. It's just associated with a certain experience of life. And then the second week we talked about, what do I have to give? And in that message was the invitation for us to see, can I think of my gift? Let me not restrict it to a dollar amount. Or dollars at all. Let me also bring into my consideration all the other things that I'm rich with, that I can give, that maybe I haven't been giving, like a smile, like understanding, like listening, like my time, like my energy, like safe passage through my thoughts. Where can I give? And let me just not think of myself as someone who has nothing to give. And let me not become someone who doesn't give. That was what we talked about. And so this week, the topic is in the form of a question, and the question is, how much should I give? And before we talk about that, let me say that there's lots of support for you in this month. For example, after each service, this whole month, there's the free mini workshop experience in room 10 through that door, the Unexpected Abundance Club, where we play with our consciousness to see if we can train ourselves to notice all the ways that we are being supported, whether that is by other people in our lives or by those just literally unexpected, somewhat surprising small things that life just puts in our way. And by paying attention to that, to feel our rich connection to life again. And as we share the stories of what comes through our life, we start to notice how generous the world is and see if we can duplicate that through small ways and grow our own generosity. And you get a free resource, a spiritual booklet when you go to the workshop that you can use to keep track of your own awareness. And if you don't feel like going to the workshop, you can download it for free from our website. And then the third resource I want to recommend to you is the suggested reading for this month, the book by Lauren Tyler Wright, Giving, the Sacred Art, Creating a Lifestyle of Generosity. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I'm currently going back to the chapter titled Giving as Holy Obligation. and learning all about the different ways that giving as an obligation shows up in other faith traditions and the power of that. It's very beautiful. We have no such obligation in Centers for Spiritual Living. We have no obligations of any kind, really. It's more of an invitation for you to explore your spiritual life over here. Because, if something's an obligation, then I can see the connection to our topic, should. And it's a troubling word for many of us. How much should I give? Is there an obligation? And really, to find the answer to that question, how much should I give, I know I have to play around with that word should, because otherwise it can stand as a block for me. Because then I'm thinking, how much do I have to give? That's what comes up in my mind. And to be honest, when I first came to a Center for Spiritual Living, that's kind of where I was. In my early exposure to the center, I wanted to know what was the minimum requirement to give so that I could meet that, because I wanted to fit in. So I approached giving with a somewhat joyless feeling of obligation. That's really how I approached it. Didn't really get into it. And in reality, what was working in me, something was moving inside me as a block, because it was frustrating my experience of joy. And what I mean by that is a sure way to get me to do something is to tell me not to do it. And a sure way to get me to not do something is to tell me I should do it. I know it's immature, but it's strong. And if you're anything like me, then the first thing I have to do with this phrase, how much should I give, is I've got to make it personal. So I take it out of the realm of some external authority or organization or deity telling me what I have to do. Because I'm not going to go with that. In other words, I've got to make it a personal position that I choose, and I've got to change should to want to. Then I can re-ask the question, how much do I want to give? Or I can even say it this way, how much do I get to give when I really shift into my own decision? I'm much more likely to take your suggestion or anybody's suggestion if you first explain to me the reasoning behind it, and it's presented more like an invitation than a command. I'm much more likely to try it if I understand it. But the problem is that intellectually understanding something doesn't actually lead to a true embodiment of what it's about. For example, I can understand that exercise is good for you. But knowing that won't make me fit and healthy. I'll just be well informed. Right? Well, I won't actually know what exercise will do for my mental, emotional, my whole system until I step past that element of trust and exploration and invitation. There's an element of not knowing where it's going that I have to walk through. I mean, you can tell me, I can know even that there is a beautiful canyon at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, a beautiful campground down there, but I'll never know it. I'll never know the awesome mystery of being at the bottom there and looking up at that sky until I make the journey. I have to go. And the going is the practice. And then when I do start to exercise, then my understanding of the subject goes beyond the description that you gave to me. And then my experience is embodied now, and I'm not depending on the testimony of other people. And so then my practice becomes my teacher. The actual practice is what instructs me about the deep meaning of everything involved. See, I'm not the teacher. Your practice is your teacher, and will always take you beyond what I can describe to you. I can only describe to you my path and my experience, but your teacher is you. So you start to exercise, and then you discover the full impact on your body of what it does. And then if you're like me, you become so filled up with it, you become enthusiastic, and then you want to tell everybody. And you start to tell all of your friends, and they can hear you, they can understand it, but they don't always get up off of the couch. And they might even want you to stop talking about it. You're just like sick of hearing you all glowing about your exercise when you discovered something or the other, right? Because there's this gap. The thing is, all of our spiritual practices, many of them I would say, maybe all, are really easy to understand intellectually. You can get the description and preach about it easily. But they have to be experienced, to be understood, to be lived from. And then when you live from it, the words fall away. And then you're in the in-group. You smile because you know the words were useless. They didn't even begin to capture what it's like. They were just, in general, a hand pointing in the direction, and you had to have some sort of faith to go that direction and try it. The same with giving, you can talk about it. I mean, really, people tell me all the time it's their least popular topic. And so when you're really enthusiastic about it and you've lived it, and it's a real turn off to hear somebody being all enthusiastic about it when you're not there yet. So a long time ago, I made a challenge to the congregation. I said, look, I am an avid giver, and I love it, and I want you to have that experience. And I know that if you do establish a practice of giving, it's going to do something for your life. I know that. So I'm going to make a challenge. I want you to take $1 a week and give it to the Center for Spiritual Living. That's $52. And I'll tell you something, if at the end of the year you don't have a beneficial experience as a result of this practice, I will give you a money-back guarantee, no questions asked. But this is how I want you to engage in it. I said, I want you to get $1 and I want you to put it in an envelope. In other words, make it formal. Take it seriously. When we ritualize something, it becomes more elevated in our consciousness. Second thing I want you to do is put your name on it. Own it. Be proud of it. Say, this is me. And the third thing I want you to do is to commit to it. Make it a personal obligation that you put on yourself. And keep your own promises and see what that does for you. And the fourth thing, make sure that where you give it, there is a heart connection, that there is already a foundation of trust with that place that you're giving it to, so that you move away from have to want to. I mean, don't give anywhere where you feel obligated or manipulated. That's bad. So one lady took up the challenge. And at the end of the year, she called me to make an appointment to come and see me. Oh, man, she's going to want her money back. She came and she sat down. As soon as she started talking, I knew she was going to ask for her money back. But she started saying, there were so many blocks in me around giving. And it wasn't until I heard your $1 a week money back guarantee, no questions asked, that I was willing to step past that block. I said, carry on. And she said, I want to tell you what those blocks were. And as she told me what the blocks were, I realized that so many of them were mine. I remember them, and maybe you have some of them. She said, at the time I was in financial difficulty because I was going through a divorce, and I was trying to establish financial security, not give it away. So giving wasn't even on my map. And she said, and the second thing was that I had an actual aversion to being manipulated into giving, because just everybody around me always wants my money. So just to hear about giving, I contracted. And she said, and the third thing, I have a mistrust of organizations like yours, churches, and being made to feel bad or to feel like I'm somehow not spiritual if I don't give. She said, it's a turnoff. And she said, And frankly, at the time, there was so much going on in my life that needed my attention that the thought of committing regularly to any one more thing was more than I could stand. And yet, I tried. I just started. And I discovered something about myself, she said. She said, at the end of the year, I discovered that in my purest heart, I already identified myself as a person who loved giving. And that I knew myself to be a generous person. But all my blocks were stealing my joy. They were getting in the way of me doing what I knew to do, what I loved doing. And she said, although she didn't use these words, she said what the author says on page 58 of this book, that giving, she discovers, has the power to help us exchange our greed, aversion, and indifference, to exchange it for a compassionate perspective and a renewed engagement with the world. In short, it has the power to change our very identity into one of generosity. Well, she didn't change her identity into one of generosity. She found her heart. And the story goes on because, that lady, eventually she moved on to another community and she took with her a solid practice of giving. And the way it happened, before she moved on, she became one of our strongest contributors. Because over time, she began to really depend on her giving practice. She depended on it to remind her about the truth of her being and what she loved about being herself. And because nobody was telling her she had to do it, she became loyal to it on her own, and she grew it on her own. When $1 a week wasn't enough to give her the thrill of generosity, she made it $2. And so on. She did it on her own time. And she reported that it changed the very way that she experienced herself in the world, and her theme for life became, what can I give? Instead of, what can I get? Now, some faith traditions, as I'm reading in the book, have got holy obligations associated with giving, obligatory practices. In Judaism, for example, there is this beautiful obligation to give to those people who are in need or who are poor. It's just beautiful. It's an obligation that is essential to the Jewish identity, so much so that to not give to those who are in need is to behave in a not properly Jewish way. It's not a commandment, though. It's more of an opportunity to be an agent of goodwill in the world. An opportunity from which no one is exempt. In fact, in the Talmud it says, even a poor person who survives on charity alone should give to charity. Beautiful. Now, we do not have any such obligations at the Center for Spiritual Living. We have no particular religious rites that you have to engage in or even believe in. We have rather an invitation for you to explore the practices that lead to an expanded heart, an expanded mind, an engaged life. So giving is something, like I said, you either do or you don't do. No consequences other than the ones associated with them according to the way of things. No punishment, no being overseeing what you do or you don't do. It's the path of your own heart. So as a result, in our early years as a developing center, a community, our giving was kind of unpredictable. We never really referenced it or put any outline on it. And in a way, what happened is the giving to the center, like, when we passed the tray, it was sort of associated with the emotional experience that people would have or not have on any given Sunday morning. Now, what I mean by that is if the message was good, or if the music was good, or if I was moved, then I would be inclined to contribute. And if it was particularly good, I might give a little more. That's a lot of pressure. And it can turn the whole worship service into a performance. Because now it means we can't have a bad day. It means we can't talk about anything that is uncomfortable. Because the cash will go down. Do you see what I mean? It's a treacherous path. I mean, if we have a bad day, we can't pay our bills. And so it means the speaker always has to be on. And the music always, and then the reality is we all have bad days. You know, that's why in marriage ceremony they say for better and for worse. Not for just when you perform well. Right? So we had to have a mature system so we could move away from the concept of spiritual entertainment to a relationship. We had to talk about it, and you had to have an open-hearted conversation about money, not because it was a holy obligation or because it was mandated by some spiritual concept, but because it was a informed, conscious choice as individuals when we thought about the bigger picture of what does the Center for Spiritual Living mean to me? What is its place in my life? And is it bigger than the music program or the message? And do I so love it that I wish to provide for its continuance for future generations? Why is it my center? Why do I love it? Am I just a casual friend, or am I in a committed relationship? And we had those conversations. It helped us move into deep relationship, shifted us away from being spiritually entertainers into taking ownership of our center. And it came to pass that we became a community of people who could count on each other to support the center in good times and in bad times. And our creditors could count on us to pay the bill, even if the message was a flop. Right. Even if we were on vacation and not present in the room, we could count on each other because it occurred to us that we liked the idea of the center and that jointly we had the power to choose and see to it that that would happen for future generations. There's no magic. It's integrity, commitment. And things started to change, all those years ago when we started having those conversations. And we learned something like the lady who learned when she took the $1 a week commitment. We learned that we love to give. And that it opens us to who we are. So now when people say to me, how much should I give? I say, I don't know. How much do you want to give? I guess a more important question then is, do you give it in ways that work for you? I mean, I would recommend doing my practice, but keep in mind, it's not a spiritual principle or a rule. It's my system. Make it formal. Commit to it. Keep your own self-imposed obligation, because when you keep your own promises, you just soar. It's not a mystery. Put your name on it. Own it. Don't go under the radar. Be counted for your own self. And connect your heart with your giving so you give to a place that you wish to see grow, because it's where you get your spiritual food from. And if it's not this place, give it elsewhere, but never, in my estimation, become someone who doesn't give. And the bonus piece of this whole message is a little teaching that comes from the Center for Spiritual Living. It goes like this. Consciousness grows with consistency. And that just applies to everything, not just giving, not just prayer. It applies to love. It applies to relationship. It applies to communication. It applies to anything. The idea is that which has a pattern in our lives, which shows up regularly and dependably because we invite it in, we become better at it. So if you sit in the same place at the same time, for the same practice of meditating, over time you will be an enthusiastic expert. And you'll want to tell everybody a story that they won't be able to understand without sitting themselves. It's the same with giving. Develop a routine that works for you. Don't let anybody tell you. You do it so that you can tell the world. I think really the key to it is it's breaking a cultural idea, really. Giving has less to do with the quantity and the amount than it has to do with what is alive in you during the act of giving. I really think that's it. I think that's the thing I could give to the world. Is to stop measuring our self-worth and our joy by a dollar amount. Let us pray. There is only one life, as we heard in the opening prayer. And we use the word life as a synonym for the divine, for whatever name we use is inadequate to describe that which is eternal and everywhere present. We mean the original architect. We mean the mind out of which creation emerges and rises up. We mean the energy of all that is. We mean life beyond this time-space continuum. We mean all in all. And we recognize that in our prayer so that we may remember together that even these words and thoughts of prayer take place in relationship with or inside of or because of, by means of this one life. So we identify closely with the original architect in a way, understanding that this prayer that we are praying together is collaborating through our choice and direction with the way creation unfolds, and we take it seriously. So we pray today to discover, to rediscover the truth of our being, that pure, plain, innocent self that loves its generous nature, so that we, through reacquaintance with it, may become again free-flowing, innocent, pure, beautiful, and contribute to a world that works for everyone. In deepest gratitude for praying together and for the shift in consciousness that takes place as a result of our prayer, and trusting the spiritual laws of the universe that deliver to us the content of our prayer, I release it in faith and trust abiding, and together we say, and so it is.